Welcome back to Shabby Shack Studio, friends. We are talking about all things journaling today. So if you've been here a minute, you know that we like to get super creative with our journal pages. I hand make my journal and I have a few videos, so I'll link those for you below of how I create my journals, and quite often I do them a little bit differently each year, but I do have a few, so I will link them for you below. You are of course welcome to use a journal that you have purchased in a discount store or in your or ordered online or whatever it is that suits you. Journaling is all about making it personal and doing what works for you. That our pages should be specific to us. So if we need a little bit more room, then we should add extra space in our weekly spread, or if you don't have a product that I'm using, that's perfectly fine. Really focus on budget-friendly creativity on this channel. I don't want to think that your creative energy is stifled by a monetary value, or that you don't have the budget to spend on that. You'll find that most of these things that I use are inexpensive, can be picked up at a craft store for very little money, or you could pop on and follow those links that I share below, the affiliate links, and grab those things from Amazon. I'm going to refocus on those links as well, because I've had a few people asking me, because you guys are from all over the world. So I'm going to try to make sure that I have links there for Canada, America, Australia, Europe, all over. So help make that a little bit easier for you. Of course, I do appreciate if you do follow those links and decide to shop via those links, because it does mean that I get a little bit of a hand in that. It doesn't cost you more. It doesn't cost you more at all to use an affiliate link. That money would come directly from Amazon to me, and it's only a tiny amount, but it all adds up, and that's nice too, because it means that I can do more of what I love. And creating these videos really quite time consuming when it comes to editing, etc. So anyway, let's focus on what I'm actually doing on the screen in front of you. You'll notice that I started with a pencil sketch because I keep getting asked to spend a little bit more time on that and share that with you. So this is my cover page. So it's also a little bit of a watercolor to share with you as well. So hello to all my watercolor fans. Now this began because my daughter bought me this beautiful bunch of mums, of chrysanthemums, and I of course popped them in a jar, and they were on the dining table, and I kept thinking I'll stop and I'll sketch them, I'll do something special, which is what I do if my family do buy me some flowers, because it's such a beautiful thought. However, we were moving things around and we had people for dinner, etc., and they got moved into the lounge room, and I didn't realize that that they didn't get moved back immediately, and then they were all looking quite wilted by the time I realized that they'd kind of gone under the radar, and I hadn't really shown enough appreciation, I think, for the thoughtfulness that was my daughter's gift. So I decided to sort through them, and I found some that were really still quite beautiful, and because I love a flower at all stages of their life, I loved that they were looking a little bit wilted and a little bit imperfect, and quite honestly that's my favorite way to paint and my favorite way to create. So thought, let's roll with it, and that will become my March journal pages. So I started with this sketch. This month is really about being creative with you. I didn't plan these pages, and quite honestly, when I started some of the pages and I was working through them, there were times when I hated what I was doing. So I hope that you'll hang in there if you feel the same when you're creating something, because I ended up really loving what I created on all my pages in the end. So this watercolor before you starts looking a little bit haggard here. It's not coming out because the flowers are quite small. It's hard to kind of create those details when you're working with a tiny, tiny canvas. However, I had chosen a quote for this month, which is, "The challenge is not to be perfect, it is to be whole." So thinking of that and focusing on that, I decided and this is how I generally work, this is not This is not news to me. I decided I'm going to power through exactly as I always do, and you can see before you I'm just erasing the lines and having another look at my canvas. So I've just added a little bit of paint in here. I've added a little bit of loose colour where the petals are going to be on my mum's. Some stems in there, just a little base that the little mason jar is sitting on. And I've come back in with some fresh eyes and my pencil again, and I'm just refining a few more details before I continue. Now, as you know, I don't normally create with an image or kind of a vignette in front of me that I'm copying. The blooms that I managed to salvage from my beautiful bouquet, you can see at the top of screen. However, I wasn't looking at them in a way that I was copying them. It was more to kind of inspire me, the blousy blooms and their little soft petals and that kind of thing. I also create all of my pages and pretty much everything that you see on my channel on the fly. I don't do practice pages and a whole lot of prep and then show you my best work, because I feel that it's not really true to how I create, and I don't know if it's really very fair to see everything so perfect. Tends to make us feel that our work is not good enough. And there's enough imposter syndrome in our artistic world already, so I don't want to add to that. So I make mistakes with you live, I fix them up, I erase lines, I work it through just as if we were creating this together. So it's like I have you right here in my studio with me, which makes my heart happy. Okay, so I started doing the loose colouring on the petals. As you could see, it was only ever meant as a guide. It was soft colouring. And because the flowers are just quite so petite, I was feeling that I just didn't have enough space to get in and show those details without it looking really messy. So I decided to come back in with some ink and really embrace the quote this month and how I was feeling and being creative with you. So hopefully you'll love this month that it really is created on the fly, and I come back in and adjust every single page, every single thing I create. I come back in and have a play with you guys and add and adjust and erase and totally create it with you. So I've come back in after I've added my ink lines in there, and I'm loving the shape of the petals and now that really soft pink that you see. Again, I'll put all my colours below like I normally do, but that pale pink was really just a Payne's grey and a quinacridone rose, and just watered down a hefty amount, so you can see it's barely a wash. Anyway, so I've just come back in and you can see me stopping and starting and stopping and starting and adding some depth into the center of the blooms, come back and add a bit more ink, add some oomph to the base with the little mason jar sitting on. I come back in and add some depth to the water. I add an extra stem. I really do create this one on the fly, and there are times when I really hate it. There really was times when I just tempted to rip the page out of my book and throw it away. But I never do that with art. I always come back with fresh eyes, even if it's not the same day. This one obviously was, but even if it's not the same day, I will come back with fresh eyes and have another play with it. And it's amazing how creative it makes us. So you can see here that I'm just taking off my my washi tape, and that's because I measured this one to fit in the journal, my actual handmade journal. So then I decided to pop my quote in here. The challenge is not to be perfect, it is to be whole. That one is actually a Jane Fonda quote, which I just love. And it really is a challenge, isn't it? It's the challenge to sometimes just let things be that we cannot fix and accept our imperfections and just love them anyway. So I really ended up loving this page, and not only that, I think it ended up helping me refocus this month, because I've been teaching again as well, and I've been time poor, and I've been trying to get myself to do all the things that I normally would get done in the studio in 5 days in 3. And of course, all that does is create a divided mind and a stressed out me. So not the ideal combination to be feeling creative. So this month could not have been more perfect. My forgotten flowers could not, again, have been more perfect, because they reminded me just how beautiful they were, even though they'd been a little bit neglected, which was me and my creative spirit. And that means that this month I get to dedicate this entire journal set up to my precious girl. So this one's for you, So. I shared a little more of my watercolour cover page than usual because I'm not going to do this one as a separate video this month. So I hope you've enjoyed a good 10-12 minutes of watercolouring with me. And you can see I've added an extra flower there. I'm still adding in little bits of watercolour and having a play. And then I will cut this one out at the end and punch the corners just so like the corners rounded. All my journal pages will be rounded at the end this month. So again, I'll link that punch for you below. And just playing and adding the stems, thinking you'd be able to see those through the glass a little bit, adding a little bit more shading. You can see that I really didn't do it in a particular way where this had to be finished before I did this. I just keep looking at as I move from one creative part to the next, and then each time I notice something else that I'd like to add, and then I just add that in until I'm 100% happy with the final page. And I really am with this one. It feels really good to me, even though there were times, like I said, when I wanted to throw it in the bin. I should mention once again that this is on one of my favourite Mont watercolour pads. This one was an A4 one, so you could see that. And then I just cut the page to suit what I needed. And I'll use the rest of it in just a moment. And don't worry, I'll walk you through that as well. Okay, so then I turn the page over. I love that these watercolour pads have a nice thickness. This one is a 190 GSM, and it means that I don't have any ghosting or issues if I want to keep creating on the other side. I also have less waste, so again, good for budget, good for the planet. So this one I did a little bit different again, just following on with the same thing this month, that I really wanted to be more creative and open myself up to worrying less about the amount of time the video is going to be and more about the heart of creating. Okay, so this one is March. I started putting my little boxes in like I normally do for my month at a glance, and I was thinking, thinking this through and thinking, how do I want this to set this up. I added my March through the center because I thought that would look really sweet, and it still leave me loads of space to put the date in. I don't put that much information in these boxes. I'll note birthdays and anniversaries and things like that, but I've got plenty of room on my weekly spread and on other pages to put additional notes. Okay, so after completing a whole lot of pencil sketches and guides so I know how it's going to sit and spatially it's going to work, just coming in with one of my favorite Staedtler pigment liners, and I'm inking this. The white cardstock you saw will of course be done with my favorite white Poplol pilot pen. I'll link that for you below. I'm actually really desperately needing a new one. It's starting to run out, so it's starting to become very apparent. I need to have a little shop myself for some stationery supplies. So this is a freehand type style that I quite like. So this is going to be quite simple. Inking in my sweet little mums as well there, and then I'm going to shade that one. If you're wondering like what size this is, it's around an A5. It's a little bit smaller, this journal this year. But the little squares are just 3 by 3 centimeters. So they're approximately 2 3/4 inches, I think, if you were thinking imperial. So I've got Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday on one page, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, Sunday, share a box on the other page. So if you're using a bullet journal and you've got your grid, then that's going to be super easy. But I prefer to create without a grid, and then obviously have lots of choice on what media I want to use for which page. hope that you loved this month's month at a glance. The white watercolour and the black cardstock sit well and nicely together. The shading on the month of March is fun. It was something that I did last month and really loved it, and it felt like if I'd filled it in it would be too heavy. Of course, if you feel something different, do it differently for yours. Otherwise, as you can see, the shading's super easy to do. You literally just turn your page to the side and do some horizontal lines, completely freehand. So fun and super easy to do, and it looks effective. Okay, and then I simply just turn the page over to create a mood tracker. Now, I haven't actually done a mood tracker in a while, and it's a pity because I actually do track how I'm feeling. It's good to look back and think when you're being a bit tough on yourself because you're feeling a bit tired, and you forget to remind yourself, I'm not a robot. Obviously, you're going to have days when you feel more productive or days when you don't, but this is a really good way to look back and realize that, you know what, you don't give yourself credit for all the days that you really power through and get so much done. It is good if you're a procrastinator, so you could actually kind of label one of these feeling procrastinated that day, and you could use it as kind of and think about tools that you could kind of hold in your arsenal to kind of help yourself remain more focused and not put things off. But I generally just say that I'm blooming that day or blah that day. So I don't make it too complicated. And obviously, because this is black and white, I can either put marks with the white gel pen, but then that would ruin the prettiness of my flowers. So I'm actually just going to use some nice watercolor pencils and just color the flowers, or even a portion of the flowers, in two different colors. So whether I'm feeling that I'm getting heaps done and I'm feeling that, because I mean on the weekends I'm renovating as well. So, and I'm always a mum. And I'm always a wife. So I'm always washing, cleaning, cooking, even the days when I'm feeling like I'm not getting things done and being creative enough. You know, I'm certainly not sitting down. And now there's no time in my house to sit down. I'm always doing something, and honestly, I'm so hard on myself on expectations of what I could possibly accomplish in one day. This is a really good page for me to kind of give myself a mental shake, or in some cases a mental slap, to get real and about what it is possible for one human being to accomplish. Anyway, I've done the sweet little mason jar again. It's actually a milk jar. It's a pint jar. So picked them up in a thrift shop, and I have loads of them and I love them. So this is actually the little mums on my desk, but obviously on a grander scale. Didn't I tell you that I create from my imagination and not from what I'm looking at? There was not that many blooms in the jar. There were just a few little buds that warmed my heart and made me feel happy. So I am just imagining more in there. Plus, obviously, I need one for every day of March, and there are 31 days in March, so I need 31 blooms or leaves. So I have actually just done a pencil sketch on this one completely on the fly, as everything is this month and as per usual. And I will count them, and you'll see me do that in just a second. I just count them once I've done a whole lot. I count to see how many I'm missing, and then I add them in. So you're going to see me do that in a minute as well. As this is a long video this month, I'm going to add some music in, so hopefully you'll enjoy that as well while we're creating. You can of course skip through or skip ahead if you don't want to watch me create all these little flowers, but if I skip things through and it's not enough in real time, when people are creating with me, they prefer to be doing it kind of one-on-one. Okay, so I've done the first lot of flowers and I've picked up my kneadable eraser. I would be so lost without this eraser. It's fantastic. And you can see me counting my blooms and leaves thinking, wait a second, how many do I have here? Well, no, still too short. And then I just pick up my trusty pencil and start thinking about where to add a leaf, where to add a bloom. I do skip through this here and there because you've already watched me create heaps of these. But I did just go back in and add a whole lot of leaves that I feel, plus it's great for when you look back and think, you know, that looks a bit bare, or, you know, it's leaning too much to one side, there's not a nice even weight. This is how I always create, so why not share that with you, my process. Yeah, so I add leaves in, I add flowers here and there, and then I'll come back in and I'll shade those words bloom and blah in two different colors, so that when I'm coloring those in later in the month, I've got to share one of these with you guys. I always forget to share the final one. But yeah, I'll know if I want to look back at the month and think, Dad, you know what, stop, pat on the back. You deserve a cup of tea and a sit down. Because you have been way more productive than you gave yourself credit for. Okay, so there's the final mood tracker, complete with little coloured pencil marks. Okay, and now I picked up the spare piece of paper I had after I had cut out my cover page. Now, it wasn't quite enough to do an entire journal page, and I'm certainly not going to throw out good watercolour paper. So, in keeping with my determination this month to be far more creative and do what I would normally do and not be conscious of time, but just conscious of enjoying the moment and the creative energy and the space, and that my journal is for me after all. I picked up some paper, and the pinstripe is actually part of my textile collection from Don't Eat the Daisies, and it is just a really sweet basic pinstripe, and I have printed some of those out on some really lovely cardstock, and I used them when I was creating journals and diaries and notebooks and all kinds of stuff. So this was a scrap I had left over. So when I put those two scraps together, voila, the perfect journal page. Okay, and then I sat down at the sewing machine, the trusty sewing machine in my studio that I always use. Yes, I do not use another sewing machine. I use the one that was originally my beautiful grandmother's. She has a special place in my heart. And every time I sit down at her beautiful Singer pedal machine, it feels like she's beside me. And I tell you, there's just not a better gift that I could ask for. So I sew all my linens on that, by the way. All my linens, everything that's created in my studio, if it's sewn, that's the machine, and I will never have it any other way. So if you have one and you want to ask me any questions about it, happy to share where I get parts, how I do things, how I got used to my pedal rhythm, which is actually super, super easy, and I now do it without even thinking. And they're so quiet, and the parts are all metal, and they're just, I mean, honestly, look at that machine. It's just luscious. So anyway, I just stitched just some black cotton I had already in the machine and stitched those pieces together, and then just cut them and punched the edges. So you can see they've been punched. And then I picked up my trusty watercolors that I already had mixed and my paintbrush, and I literally painted it this quickly, my color palette. I wanted it to look splashed on and fun and not too contrived, and I just felt that March, because here in Australia we're actually going into autumn, which is, if you're in the US, is fall, and we don't have a huge drastic change in season, although it does get a bit cooler, which is a blessing because it's darn hot up here. So if you heard about Australia, you will know that they say that it's hot, but Queensland is super hot. So it's hotter than Sydney or Melbourne. So some people know those states better than Queensland. Queensland's up the top. So it does get really hot here in summer all the time. And so it is nice to have the change in season. So I just added in a bit of Payne's grey and a little bit more of the sepia, just to kind of muddy the colours a bit. But you can really see, I know you can't see my palette very well, but the palette's just got a whole lot of sap green on it, and it's mixed in with some burnt umber and sepia, a little bit of Payne's grey and yellow ochre, and then just lots of water, and I've allowed them to mix and mingle and muddy up together. And then I've just splashed them on and then added some pure colour straight from the palettes, just to add a little bit more oomph as the watercolours dry. So if you're not a big watercolour fan, you will notice, because you're seeing this in real time, that as the pages or as the colour dries, it significantly lightens. It's supposed to be like 30%, but sometimes it looks even greater. So while it's still wet, I add that colour, which is called wet on wet, and I add that in and just keep letting it bloom and letting it kind of blend through and create these beautiful changes of tone. felt needed to be added for me. And as I said, every single page this month, I went back and added things in. Okay, so I then turned that page over. So this is the back of the colour palette, so you can still see the seam at the back. And I decided to do a page that I decided to call Brainstorm. And this is because I have ideas all the time for videos I want to do and blogs I need to write, and just so many things that I need to do, that I thought this is a really good place that I can actually write them down, because I have bits of paper and notes everywhere and I don't always go back to them, whereas this kind of keeps everything in one spot. So this was really a super simple page, really, just with some just freestyle fonts, and then I'm going to add that same shading in there and a little bit of yellow Copic marker, and just give myself some space to note all those things down that I need to each month, and a little reminder page, really. Those little lines really do add the perfect amount of detail, I think. And then I added a little bit of washi tape just to cover where that seam was, and I just thought it was a nice little addition to that piece. Okay, and then I've turned over to one of my favorite digital silk papers. I always do my weekly spread in this because I love how the Copic marker and how it just spreads on this. It allows me to blend and build colour without it absorbing into the page, whereas if I put it onto the watercolour paper, it would just absorb it and it would be just a blob of colour, which is not ideal. Now I am finding that I'm flat out at the moment fitting everything into my weekly spread with so many days, so I've decided to just do this with 2 days. So you'll see this one, it's got my mum's in it again, so keeping my theme going. Again, very blousy, very imperfectly perfect. I've just put Monday and Tuesday. I'm going to add some little boxes in around that, and of course the days of the week. Okay, but we are getting toward the end of the video, so I just wanted to touch base with you and see what you thought. I would love some feedback, and if you like the longer video, if you would prefer it was, you know, that I focused on the shorter ones again, or break it up more, or I'd love to see your pages if you'd like to link me on socials, if I inspire you to create something. If you too make your own journal, whatever it is, I'd love to hear from you and keep in touch. You can find me on Instagram and Facebook. I do have a Pinterest page, and of course you can comment below, and please don't forget to hit follow and subscribe to the channel if you would like to see more journaling and more creative pages. And there's going to be so much, and I've got heaps of Easter ideas as well already kind of swirling around in my mind, so there's going to be some fun project, whether that's for your children or as gifts, or even for somebody who I'm going to do some for the older people, like the more mature ones. We still like a gift at Easter. It doesn't always have to be chocolate, something a little flashy and pretty and jewelry. would be fantastic. So Easter isn't just for children. So before we go and sign off for this month, last but not least is my page keeper. Now, of course, this should be my first page, but the last couple of months it's been left to last because I've been concentrating on watercolor cover pages and then all those pretty pages in between. But this one's a simple one. This is little rums on the black cardstock. It denotes the beginning of the month, makes my pages and my month easy to find, and it's just a very sweet little scrap turned into something wonderful. Okay, so I hope that you have a fabulous March, and I hope that you have enjoyed these pages and that I have inspired you to create something fantastic and fabulous, and more than anything, to be present and whole and not perfect. Thanks so much.